Hey ladies and gentlemen, Krzysztof the Polish Geek, and welcome to another top 10 list, actually top 15 list. And yes, I haven't done top lists in a while actually, but here I have one now, my top 15 favorite animated movies, because I really love animation. Like, yes, animation is actually one of my very favorite genres. Like, if I ever told you my favorite genre of movies, I'm not sure what would be my ultimate favorite genre, but animation would certainly be really up there, because I truly love animation, like, and various different styles of animation, like anime and Western animation, computer generated animation, you name it, that there are so many different types of animation. Yes, I really love animation, and I totally think an animated movie can totally be much better than a live action movie. And in some of those movies, probably actually all those movies on this list, I don't think I would love them as much in live action. Animation is very much part of their magic. But I really love animation, and on this list, anything animated is welcome. Whether it's a kids animated movie, adult animated movie, anything is welcome. So yes, there are anime movies on this list, as well as Western animated movies on this list, or European animated movies on this list. I mean, that goes for Western, but I mean, yes, there are American animated, European, Japanese anime, and basically anything animated is welcome, whether it's for kids or adult. Anything animated is welcome. So here are my favorite top 15 favorite movies of all time. And this was really hard list to compose, because there are just so many animated movies I love. But because I had to leave out so many, I'll actually give you some honorable mentions first. And my honorable mentions are the first three Toy Story movies. The fourth one is decent, but the first three really are really the best, and the fourth one wasn't really that needed anyway. Coco, Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Disney's The Sword in the Stone, Suzume, and both Into the Spider-Verse movies. Those two, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movies, actually, I was actually very tempted to actually put them on the list, because they almost made the list, and the only reason I ultimately decided not to put them on the list was because technically they aren't complete yet. Like, we still have Beyond the Spider-Verse coming, so I decided that depending on how the story concludes, I decided that not to put them on the list quite yet, but depending on how Beyond the Spider-Verse ends up being, those movies have a very high chance of actually ended up on the actual list. But again, because we don't know how the story ends yet, that's the only reason why I ultimately put them in honorable mentions for now. But we'll really see how Beyond the Spider-Verse goes. But all those are fantastic, incredible animated movies, and I really love all those. Although they couldn't quite make it to the actual top 15 list, because that's really the limit of a list. So now let's get on with an actual top 15 favorite animated movies of all time. And by the way, again, those are not actually the best animated movies of all time, my personal favorites. Yes, I definitely think at least some of those top 15 favorite animated movies, I definitely think some of them are also objectively very much some of the best animated movies ever. But overall, just my personal favorites. And again, this list is kind of subject to a change, and sometimes the order can kind of flip around. I'm only really 100% sure about my top 5. But now, here we go. At number 15, Castle in the Sky. And yes, of course, it's been expected that there will be some Miyazaki movies on this list, and Castle in the Sky is by far one of his best works ever. Like, the animation is spectacular, and I love all the attention to detail in the animation, and the music is great, and I also love all the characters. Pazu and Shida and the pirates are also awesome, and Colonel Muskai is such an evil and very amazing villain, and in the English version, Mark Hamill does a phenomenal job voicing him, and because of Mark Hamill actually, is actually the reason why I generally actually watch the English dubbed version. Yeah, it is fun sometimes to actually watch the original Japanese version, but because of Mark Hamill, I actually slightly prefer the English dub because of that, and the world building in this movie is fantastic, and I also love the lore and everything. Castle in the Sky is by far one of Miyazaki's best movies, and it's a shame it gets so much overlooked in favor of Spirited Away or Wind Rises, which are pretty good movies, but unpopular opinion, I think they're actually slightly overrated. I think Castle in the Sky and another movie that's higher on this list are actually both much better than Spirited Away. My opinion. Castle in the Sky at number 15. At number 14, and this time we have a Don Bluth movie, An American Tail. Yes, I really love Don Bluth. I think he's a really fantastic animator, and I really love many of his movies, and An American Tail is actually one of my favorites of his. I really love the story of this movie and the characters, because the movie is about immigration. One of the subjects I'm actually really fascinated by about the history of immigration to the United States. And the main characters are actually Russian mice who are immigrating to the United States. And I really love how, although it's clear that humans do exist in the movie and they're actually shown simultaneously immigrating with the mice, but the movie focuses on the mice, and basically I really like how it nicely basically shows what the immigration to the United States throughout centuries was like, and what type of struggles all immigrants were facing, and how they were exploited, and those who are exploiting them in this movie are actually cats, which makes perfect sense actually. And I also love the characters, with main character being Fievel Mauskewitz, who gets separated from his family, and also a lot of the movie is actually him looking for his family, and I really also love the dark tone of the movie, and the songs are awesome. With my favorite, "We're a duo, a duo." Yup, I really love An American Tail, and I think it is one of Don Bluth's best movies. And number 14 on this list. Number 13, and I think this is one of the most underrated animated movies ever. It deserves so much more love, and that's The Adventures of Tintin by Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson. And yes, I really love that movie. I think it's a much better Indiana Jones movie than the last two actual Indiana Jones movies. I really love Tintin going on his treasure hunt adventure. And by the way, I actually grew up as a kid reading Tintin comics and watching Tintin cartoons on Saturday morning, and I think this movie totally does them justice, although even if I haven't actually seen the cartoons or read the comics, I still would very much love this movie, because this movie is excellent. I really love the realistic looking animation of this movie, which kind of gives me vibes of some PlayStation 4 video games, like Assassin's Creed Unity, for example. And I also love the characters. I love Tintin and Captain Haddock, and I think Ivan Sakharin is such a great villain, and I also love how he has this personal history with Captain Haddock, of both of them, of their ancestors fighting with each other, and then almost like being both incarnations of their ancestors, and then now fighting each other and all. And I already said it and I will say it again, this is a much better Indiana Jones movie than last two actual Indiana Jones movies. So if you love more of Indiana Jones, then I think this is just perfect. I really love The Adventures of Tintin, and I think it is so underrated. Number 12, and that's Tale as Old as Time, Beauty and the Beast. And this is by far the best movie of the Disney Renaissance, and definitely one of the best animated movies, best Disney animated movies ever. Lots of people actually think this is the best Disney animated feature of all time, and for a good reason, because this movie has everything that always made Disney great. It has a really great story, and I also love the romance between Belle and the Beast, and it's so well done, it's so well written, and Belle is also by far one of the best Disney princesses ever, if not the best, and the songs are fantastic, and the animation is spectacular, and Also, this movie is just so well written and so well done, and it's like also the first Disney movie to actually be nominated for an Oscar, and yep, this movie is simply phenomenal, and no wonder it's actually considered the best animated Disney movie. Like, I actually have one much higher on the list, but this is certainly one of the best Disney animated features ever. And also, the villain Gaston is great too. Like, yep, everything about the Beauty of and the Beast is fantastic, and it's by far one of the best romance stories ever done. Number 11. Princess Mononoke, and I think this is by far the best Miyazaki movie ever done. Like, most people say that Spirited Away is the best Miyazaki movie, but I beg to differ. I think Princess Mononoke is just so much better. First, this movie is a visual wonder. The animation is so gorgeous and spectacular. I mean, Miyazaki movies in general have a spectacular animation, but honestly, I still think the animation of Princess Mononoke is by far the best, and I think it holds up so well when I watch newer Miyazaki movies. As much as I think the animation is fantastic, for some reason, I still think Princess Mononoke has the best animation of them all, and I really love the epic scale of this movie and the philosophical messaging of this movie, and I also love the overall message how nature and technology shouldn't be enemies, they should be friends and should coexist with each other. And this was originally actually supposed to be Miyazaki's last movie, and honestly, I wouldn't shed a tear if it actually was. I mean, yeah, he's made plenty of animated movies since then. He's done a lot of animated movies since that movie, but honestly, I don't think any of them ever matched the quality of Princess Mononoke. And some people say that putting it only at number 11 is too low, but again, this is just my personal list. Like, yes, from a pure objective standpoint, this movie should in fact probably be much higher on the list. But at the same time, this is such a deep and powerful movie that you truly have to be in a mood and commitment to watch this movie. Like, from an objective standpoint, it probably should be higher, but in terms of pure enjoyment, that's kind of where it is, because as fantastic as this movie is, I also think you truly have to be in a mood to be able to watch it. Like, the movies are higher on the list, I could go back and watch them over and over again, but Princess Mononoke is something you truly have to be in a mood for to watch again. Number 10, and here we have a classic of a French cinema, The King and the Mockingbird. Like, yes, this movie is simply fantastic, phenomenal, and actually, this is actually one of those animated movies that very much inspired Hayao Miyazaki. Like, and when you watch it, you totally see that influence is clearly there. Like, without this movie, none of our favorite Miyazaki movies would ever exist. This is a movie that very much partially inspired Miyazaki, and again, when you watch it, you totally see that influence clearly is there. And I also love the animation of this movie. It's so unique and unlike anything you ever seen before, and I also love the surrealistic style of the movie, and the story is told in such a clever and creative manner. Like, it almost feels like a poem or a painting come to life. And I also love the universal themes of this movie: love story, tyranny, the class difference between the rich and the poor and all. And The King and the Mockingbird didn't just inspire Hayao Miyazaki, it inspired plenty of many other animators all over the world. And I also suggest to actually read some production history about this movie. This movie was actually partially completed in the 60s, but then it was completed in its full glory in the 80s. And when you read about the full history production of this movie, you actually appreciate it even more. Like, The King and the Mockingbird is one of the most unique, creative animated movies ever, and without it, plenty of our favorite modern animated movies would likely not exist. The King and the Mockingbird deserves to be on this list alone, just for its history and influence. But even without it, it's still a really spectacular movie. Now, my number 9 and 8 are perfect examples of two movies that are kind of interchangeable. They very much go back and forth. I really love both of those movies and they kind of feel personal to me. But today for number 9, I decided to go with Wolf Children, and yes, I think this is a spectacular anime movie and it feels so personal to me. This is a movie about a single mother that raises her two children that are actually part wolf children, and it also strongly reminds me of my sister and niece and nephew, because my sister is also actually a single mother who is raising her two kids. I think I talked about it a couple of times already, and I sometimes even come and help her with her two kids. My niece and nephew literally mean the world to me. They're everything to me. And yes, the two wolf children do kind of remind me of my niece and nephew, even though, being objective, my niece and nephew obviously aren't part wolves. But either way, I still think it's a really great movie with a great emotional story, and I also think this is a perfect movie for all single mothers to watch, actually, because this movie very much explores the struggles of motherhood or parenthood in general, and about the struggles that single mothers often face. So yes, this I think is a very important movie for many people to watch, actually, and I still think it's a great movie with great characters and really great story. And as I said, I will say it again, it feels very personal to me. And if I ever introduce my sister to an anime, I think probably this is the movie I would show her. And I do plan someday. Number 8. And this is also feels kind of personal to me, and that's Anastasia by Don Bluth. Like I already said, I love Don Bluth, and I think Anastasia is by far his best work. Like, this movie kind of also feels personal to me because I actually been to St. Petersburg a couple of times, very beautiful city, and I really find the story about Anastasia and her father Tsar Nicholas II and all her family being slaughtered very sad and touching, although the truth is the real Anastasia sadly hasn't survived the slaughter, which is even more tragic. But I really love this movie about how Anastasia is basically trying to explore her history, because she doesn't actually remember any of her childhood at all. And I also love how she's actually traveling to Paris to find her grandmother, which also feels personal to me because, as I said, I've been to St. Petersburg a couple of times, and then she's traveling through Poland, which everyone knows that's where I'm from, that's my native country, and this room where all my videos are happening is actually in Poland, obviously, and then she ends up in Paris, where my sister, niece and nephew live. And I think, and this is all very personal to me, and I also think Anastasia is a really phenomenal character. If she actually was made by Disney, then she would likely be my very favorite Disney princess, because I think she's such a great and well-written character. And also Rasputin is such a phenomenal villain. He looks awesome, and he is awesome in general, and he sings such an amazing song. In the darker the night, evil will find her. And many people say this feels more like Disney than Don Bluth, but I strongly disagree. Yes, it's clear that there is lots of Disney in this movie, but I also think there is plenty of Don Bluth too. Yep, Anastasia is a fantastic movie and my favorite work of Don Bluth, and in some ways it feels personal to me, like Wolf Children before it. Number 7, and that's How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Like, yes, I think all 3 of those movies are fantastic, and it was so difficult to say which one. I actually think I like the third one the most, but overall I think this trilogy is one of those trilogies where basically all 3 movies are basically telling one story. It's basically 3 chapters of the same story. That's why I decided to ultimately put them all in one spot. Again, the third movie of those 3 is by far my favorite, but I think all 3 are fantastic, and I love the story about Hiccup and his Night Fury Dragon Toothless, and I also love all the other characters. Like, I love his father Stoic, and I love Astrid and and his mother. Yep, I really love all the characters in this trilogy, and I also love the Viking setting. Like, especially I really love Vikings, and I think also, and the computer-generated animation is spectacular, and all the Viking landscapes look so beautiful and gorgeous, and the story is so well written, and All three of those movies are fantastic, but again, as I said it before, I think the third is by far the best, and a fantastic conclusion. I thought it will not fall into the same trap of Toy Story and get a needless fourth movie. No, the trilogy is perfect as it is, and the ending is simply fabulous. And yes, they are remaking it in live action, which like, what? But who cares? We have a fantastic animated trilogy, and that's really all we need. Really love How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, and I'm surprised to say it, but I used to be very much on the team Toy Story, but after the third How to Train Your Dragon, I'm firmly now on the How to Train Your Dragon side. Even though I used to be team Toy Story now, but there's nothing changing it. I'm strictly team How to Train Your Dragon after the fabulous third movie. Number 6. Ninja Scroll. And yes, this is such a fantastic anime movie. This is the very first anime movie I've ever seen, and this single-handedly got me into anime, and I love Ninja Scroll so much. This is basically Berserk in feudal Japan, and Berserk is such an amazing manga, and it totally should get a full anime adaptation someday. Like, the best anime adaptation of Berserk is from 97, but sadly it only adapted like the beginning of the story. What a shame. This truly deserves someday a full anime adaptation, but again, Ninja Scroll is basically Berserk in feudal Japan. I mean, it's not as deep or thematically rich as Berserk, but come on, it's like a 2-hour movie. There is only so much you can put into a 2-hour movie. Of course it's not going to be as deep and complex as Berserk, but still, either way, as I said, it's still very much Berserk in feudal Japan, and it has a really great story about Ninja Jubei and his fight against 8 Devils of Kimon, and all those 8 Devils of Kimon have such unique and incredible designs, and also the animation of the movie is so unique and spectacular, and it totally gives the vibe of Akira Kurosawa movies. And again, if you ever wanted to introduce a friend to anime movies, I think Ninja Scroll is the very one you should use. Especially that it got me into anime. And also the fight scenes are in Ninja Scroll are incredible. Yep, love Ninja Scroll. And someday it will actually get a you should be watching treatment. Number 5. And this is actually a most recent animated movie on the list, and it's Pinocchio by Guillermo del Toro. And yes, I've been very much praising of how fantastic this movie is when it came out, and nothing has changed. I still very much adore this movie. And yes, this movie was very much rightfully praised, but it's pretty obvious to me that I don't think anyone loves this movie as much as I did, because yeah, this movie is so magical and so spectacular. I really love the take on Pinocchio set in World War II, and I really love how it explores actually what fascism was really like in fascist Italy and all, because it was set from the beginning, it will be set in fascist Italy, but it's not just like a background setting, no. Like, fascistic Italy is very much incorporated into the movie story, which is simply wonderful. And I also love how, in some ways, some people would argue it's basically the Dark Knight of Pinocchio, in that it's a much more realistic take of Pinocchio. Outside of Living Wooden Puppet, everything in this movie is actually very realistic. And I also love the animation, like the textures look so wonderful and all. And also, this is by far my favorite movie of Guillermo del Toro. Yes, even more than Pan's Labyrinth. I love Pan's Labyrinth, but I actually think this is better. This is by far my favorite movie of Guillermo del Toro, and it's still very much my favorite movie of 2020's decade. And also, very much one, because I very much was mad at del Toro for Shape of Water, which I hated, but this movie basically, Guillermo del Toro basically earned all my respect back single-handedly with this wonderful movie, and I'm very much looking forward to his take on Frankenstein. But I really love, and I also really love the themes of this movie and the philosophical debate of what it truly means to be human at all. Yep, everything in this movie is wonderful. I truly love Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and this is by far one of the best takes on the Pinocchio tale. This movie is fantastic. And honestly, as I said before, maybe someday I'll have to give it a you should be watching treatment. Like, I mean, yeah, I already reviewed this back when it came out, but after a couple of years will pass, I think I might actually give it a you should be watching treatment, because I think this is one of those movies that will only get better with every rewatch. Number 4, and this is another movie that's very much going to get a you should be watching treatment. In fact, it's actually very much next in line for my you should be watching video, and that's The Prince of Egypt. Like, yep, I really love that movie. This is the best movie of DreamWorks by far, and I think this is one of those animated movies that's very much for adults. Like, I could not really see lots of kids liking this movie, but not only this movie speaks very much to my religion, but even leaving my Christian religion out of it, like, this movie is fantastic. It has a splendid story, splendid characters, really beautiful and gorgeous hand-drawn animation, and really beautiful hand-drawn landscapes. Like, everything about this movie is great. And I also love the story of Moses and Ramses and their brotherly love, and how later the end of the story is very tragic because of who they were. It's a very sad ending, although you also do wonder at the end of the movie how their relationship could play out differently under very different circumstances, and also the songs are also wonderful and catchy, and the 10 Plagues is so intimidating and all. And it's also by far the best take on the story of Exodus, because the Ridley Scott movie was pretty bad, and the 10 Commandments, although a very good movie at the end of the day, it does drag at times, while this movie is paced perfectly, and The Prince of Egypt is by far one of the greatest animated movies ever made, with really spectacular animation, spectacular characters, and very well written story. And I already said it, will say it before, it's next in line for the you should be watching treatment. Number 3, and this admittedly is kind of a nostalgia bias, but either way, it's still a very great animated movie and one of my favorites, and that's 12 Tasks of Asterix. Yes, I'm a huge fan of Asterix in general. Those are the comics I grew up reading in my childhood, as well as watching all the animated movies. And of all the Asterix animated movies, this one is by far my favorite. 12 Tasks of Asterix. And funnily enough, it's actually not based on any of the comics. It's actually an original story. Yes, it was later adapted into a comic, but the animated movie was first. And to talk more about this, I have to talk more about Asterix in general, because Asterix is actually a pretty funny, like, basically alternate history comics. Basically about the history how Julius Caesar conquered all of Gaul, all of Europe, including Gaul, except one small village in Britain that that basically has this magic potion that makes them invincible, and then they hit the Romans and the Romans fly in the air, and it's all really so funny, and also makes plenty of modern pop cultural references, and it's just so funny. I even have to laugh as I'm telling you all of this, because Asterix is probably my favorite also comedy of all time. Most Asterix movies are actually pretty good, with the exception of Asterix Conquers America and Asterix vs. Caesar. Those two aren't particularly good, but most Asterix animated movies are actually great and really funny. And I was really wondering which one I should really put, but ultimately I decided to go with 12 Tasks of Asterix, because this one by far is my favorite, and all the modern references are really awesome in the jokes, and I also love how this is also kind of a rendition on the take of the myth of Heracles. Of course, he is referenced, and they are using his Roman name, Hercules. I guess it's justified, since those are the Romans who give them those 12 tasks, but I also really love all the tasks and all, with my favorite being actually the one with the Egyptian magician and all. But this movie is just so funny. It's also not only my favorite Asterix movie, it's also my favorite comedy of all time, probably. But yes, I really love Asterix in general, but 12 Tasks of Asterix is by far my favorite Asterix animated movie, but I'll also give a shout out to several other really good ones like Asterix Mission Cleopatra, Asterix The Secret of the Magic Potion, that one is probably very close second favorite Asterix movie, Asterix in Britain. Yep, all really great Asterix movies, but 12 Tasks of Asterix is ultimately my favorite. Number 2, and this will be a very brief talk because I already talked a lot about it in my most recent You Should Be Watching video, so you know now what's number 2 because that's Sword of the Stranger, and this is by far my favorite anime movie of all time, and clearly also one of my favorite animated movies of all time. I was actually debating if I should put it as number 1, but you'll see what's my number 1 soon, but this also came pretty close to being number 1 because everything I said in my You Should Be Watching video is pretty much how I feel and will always feel about this movie. But to make it fast, is like, yes, the story is pretty simple yet fantastic just because of how the characters are phenomenal and the animation is so gorgeous, and I also love how some of the landscape visuals basically look like Renaissance paintings, and the villain is also one of the best anime villains of all time, and the fight scenes are spectacular, some of the best fight scenes I've ever seen with the final sword duel, simply maybe possibly the best sword duel I've ever seen in any movie. And this movie, kind of like Ninja Scroll that I already talked about, also gives me vibes of Akira Kurosawa movies, but for some reason, as much as I love Akira Kurosawa, I actually think this movie is better than them all. Sword of the Stranger almost came close to being number 1, but it's number 2, ultimately. But, ladies and gentlemen, my number 1 favorite animated movie of all time is When You Wish Upon a Star. Disney's Pinocchio. Like, yes, you've probably been seeing that there weren't particularly that many Disney movies on this list, but here at number 1, you have the second Disney movie on this list because this movie was made back all the way in 1940, and this is the second Disney animated feature ever, but it just holds up so well. Like, I love the beautiful animation of this movie and all the attention to detail, like literally, this was made in 1940, yet all the attention to detail in the animation, like people in the small Italian town and all, is still so wonderful. And also, I also really love the story of this movie about the wooden puppet coming back to life and learning to be a good boy. And I also love the message of this movie. It's wonderful and so universal, and it's also so relatable. And this movie is also the very movie that I loved in my childhood and I still love now. Plus the songs are fantastic, like including the aforementioned When You Wish Upon a Star, plus Hi Diddle Diddy, An Actor's Life for Me, or Give Me a Little Whistle. All the songs in this movie are simply spectacular and so catchy. And I also love another message of this movie, which is that whenever I hear the song When You Wish Upon a Star, this is one of those songs I often listen to when I'm in a really bad mood and I'm really going through something tough, like, because this whole song for some reason always gives me hope for the future, even if things seem terrible. I mean, like, yep, like When You Wish Upon a Star, it gives me so much hope for the future when things are really going on terrible with me, but I'm not getting into that personal stuff. And also, this movie is also very much an embodiment of Disney magic that's more relevant than ever now that all the magic is basically completely stripped from Disney at this point, because Disney is basically a complete shadow of its former self at this point. Maybe that's even putting it more lightly, but this movie is basically an embodiment of Disney magic. Like, yeah, When You Wish Upon a Star is actually often used as a symbol song for Disney, just like Mickey Mouse is a symbol character. When You Wish Upon a Star is basically a song that's often used as a symbol of Disney, and it holds so true, actually. Like, Disney's Pinocchio will probably always be my favorite animated movie of all time, and I don't think it's ever going to change. And Yes, I also probably should give it a you should be watching treatment someday, but here guys, you have my top 15 favorite animated movies of all time. As I said it in the beginning of the video and you say it again, I really love animation, and an animated movie, as this list proves, can totally be sometimes much better than a live action movie. And also, if you ask me if I prefer computer generated animation or hand drawn, the answer probably, if you actually see the list, is pretty clear that yes, I very much prefer hand-drawn animation. And it's not to say that there aren't great computer-generated animated movies, like this list alone proves that clearly there are some, but yes, I generally prefer hand-drawn animation, and those are my definite 15 favorite animated movies. Although, because there still are many other animated movies coming out, and as I said, those movies aren't necessarily in particular order, I might actually have to redo the list someday in like a couple of years. But for now, these are my ultimate definite favorite animated movies of all time. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel. What are your favorite animated movies? Please let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you later. Bye!